Imagine walking into a house where everything looks perfectly normal. The television is still on, the family dog is happily greeting visitors, three purses are neatly lined up beside the front door, a half-finished cigarette rests in an ashtray. Jewelry, money, and car keys are all exactly where they should be. Yet the three women who lived in that house are nowhere to be found. No note, no signs of a struggle, no broken windows, no screams heard by neighbors, no bodies, just silence. More than 30 years have passed since that strange summer morning, but the mystery has only grown deeper. Investigators have chased hundreds of leads, interviewed countless witnesses, and examined every clue they could find. Despite all of that effort, no one has ever been charged, and no one can say with certainty what happened inside that quiet home. Some believe a stranger entered the house under the cover of darkness. Others think someone the victims trusted was responsible. A few believe the answers have been hidden in plain sight all along. This is the story of one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries, the disappearance of the Springfield Three. June 7, 1992 was supposed to be one of the happiest days in the lives of two teenage girls. Springfield, Missouri was alive with excitement as families gathered to celebrate high school graduation. Cameras flashed as proud parents hugged their children. Friends laughed together, promising to stay in touch no matter where life took them. 19-year-old Suzanne "Susie" Streeter had finally reached a milestone she had worked toward for years. Susie was known for her outgoing personality. Friends described her as energetic, independent, and always ready for adventure. Like many teenagers standing on the edge of adulthood, she dreamed about the future. Graduation wasn't just the end of high school, it was the beginning of a completely new chapter. By her side that evening was her close friend, Stacy McCall. Stacy was also 19 and had spent much of her high school life building friendships and making memories she hoped would last forever. Unlike Susie's bold personality, Stacy was often described as thoughtful and responsible. Together, however, the two balanced each other perfectly. Graduation ceremonies are usually remembered for joy, excitement, and hope. No one could have imagined that this celebration would become the last time many people would ever see the girls alive. After the ceremony ended, Susie and Stacy joined classmates for graduation parties around Springfield. The evening was filled with music, laughter, and conversations about college, jobs, and the future. Witnesses later recalled seeing nothing unusual about either young woman. They appeared happy, relaxed, and excited about life. As the night grew later, the girls adjusted their plans several times. Originally, they had intended to spend the night at a friend's home. However, too many people had gathered there, making it difficult to find a comfortable place to sleep. Instead, they decided to return to Susie's house. It seemed like the simplest decision in the world. The house, located in a quiet Springfield neighborhood, belonged to Susie's mother, Cheryl Levitt. 47-year-old Cheryl had recently renovated the home and was proud of the life she had built there. Friends remembered her as warm, caring, and deeply devoted to her daughter. Unlike many parents, Cheryl maintained a close friendship with Susie while still looking after her well-being. They shared the home peacefully, often spending evenings together after busy days. No one knows exactly when Cheryl went to bed that night. Investigators believe she was already home before Susie and Stacy arrived. Sometime after 2 a.m., the girls drove back to the house in separate vehicles. Several neighbors later reported hearing nothing unusual. No shouting, no crashing sounds, no gunshots, no calls for help. If something terrible happened that night, it happened with terrifying speed and almost unbelievable silence. Inside the house, everything appeared ordinary. The beds looked as though they had been prepared for sleeping. Personal belongings remained untouched. Nothing suggested that the women intended to leave the house voluntarily. Then morning arrived. Family members expected the girls to attend plans they had already made. When neither Susie nor Stacy answered their phones, friends became concerned. At first, no one imagined the truth. Teenagers sometimes overslept after graduation celebrations. Perhaps they had changed plans again. Maybe they had gone out for breakfast. Maybe they were simply tired. Those explanations made perfect sense. until someone walked through the front door. What they found inside would become one of the most baffling crime scenes in American history. There were no obvious signs of violence. The television was on, the dog was alive and wandering through the house. 3 purses sat together as if waiting for their owners to return. Cars remained parked outside. Everything valuable was still there, except the 3 women. They had vanished, without a trace, without a witness, without an explanation. And that impossible mystery has remained unsolved for more than 3 decades.
Morning arrived quietly over Springfield, Missouri. The warm June sunlight spread across the peaceful neighborhood, where nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Birds chirped from the trees, sprinklers watered freshly cut lawns, and families began another typical Sunday. At 1717 East Delmar Street, however, something was terribly wrong. No one inside answered the phone. No one opened the front door, and no one knew that the mystery surrounding that house had already begun. A promise that was never kept. Before going to bed that night, Susie and Stacy had made plans for the following day. The girls were supposed to visit a water park with friends. It was meant to be another day of celebrating their graduation before everyone went their separate ways. When the girls failed to arrive, their friends assumed they had simply overslept. Graduation parties had lasted well into the early morning hours. Sleeping late wasn't unusual, but as the morning stretched toward noon, concern slowly replaced patience. Calls to the house went unanswered. Eventually, 2 of Stacy McCall's friends decided to drive over to Susie's home. They expected to find the girls asleep. Instead, they found a mystery. Before going to bed that night, Susie and Stacy had made plans for the following day. The girls were supposed to visit a water park with friends. It was meant to be another day of celebrating their graduation before everyone went their separate ways. When the girls failed to arrive, their friends assumed they had simply overslept. Graduation parties had lasted well into the early morning hours. Sleeping late wasn't unusual, but as the morning stretched toward noon, concern slowly replaced patience. Calls to the house went unanswered. Eventually, 2 of Stacy McCall's friends decided to drive over to Susie's home. They expected to find the girls asleep. Instead, they found a mystery. When the friends pulled into the driveway, nothing immediately seemed unusual. Susie's car was parked outside. Stacy's car was there too. If both vehicles were still at the house, the girls were probably inside. Or so they thought. As they walked toward the front porch, they noticed something odd. The glass globe covering the porch light had been shattered. Pieces of broken glass were scattered across the steps. At first, it didn't seem important. One of the friends reportedly swept away the broken glass so no one would accidentally step on it. It was a thoughtful gesture. But years later, investigators would wonder whether those tiny shards of glass had been evidence. If someone had struggled outside the house. If fingerprints had been left on the broken light fixture. If footprints had been hidden beneath the glass. Those clues were now gone forever. No one could have known. No one imagined they had just walked into the beginning of one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. The front door wasn't locked. The visitors stepped inside, calling out the girls' names. Susie, Stacy, silence. Only one sound echoed through the house. A small dog barked excitedly. The family's Yorkshire Terrier wandered through the living room, happy to see visitors. The dog appeared healthy. It hadn't been abandoned for days. Someone had either left it loose inside the house, or had been there recently enough for it to still seem calm. That detail would puzzle investigators for years. As the friends looked around, the house felt strangely normal. Too normal. The television was still on. Lights remained illuminated. A half-finished cigarette sat quietly in an ashtray. 3 purses rested together. Inside those purses were driver's licenses, money, makeup, personal belongings. Nothing appeared to be missing. Even more confusing, all 3 women's car keys were still inside. For anyone planning to leave voluntarily, abandoning a purse was unusual. Leaving behind identification was even stranger. Leaving behind every purse, every key, and every vehicle? That was almost impossible to explain. The friends cautiously looked through the house. Beds appeared to have been slept in. Blankets were disturbed. Nothing looked violently overturned. There were no broken windows. No smashed furniture. No obvious signs of a fight. Bathrooms contained makeup and personal items exactly where they should have been. Closets remained untouched. Drawers had not been emptied. If someone had kidnapped 3 women from inside the house, They had somehow managed to do it without leaving behind visible chaos. It was as though the women had simply disappeared into thin air. The visitors began checking nearby homes. Had Susie gone next door? Had Stacy walked somewhere? Maybe the women had gone shopping together. Every possibility seemed more believable than what they feared. Still, hours continued to pass. No one had seen them. No one had spoken to them. No one knew where they had gone. Finally, someone contacted family members. Within a short time, more people arrived at the house. Parents, friends, relatives, each hoping to find a simple explanation. Instead, they unknowingly made a critical mistake. When Springfield police arrived, experienced investigators immediately noticed something that didn't fit. People don't usually leave home without their purses. They don't leave medication behind. They don't leave every vehicle parked outside. Most importantly, 3 people rarely disappear together voluntarily. Detectives carefully searched every room. No blood, no signs of forced entry, no ransom note, no obvious weapon. Nothing that explained how 3 women had vanished from a suburban home without waking the neighbors. The house seemed to be hiding its secrets. Officers began knocking on doors. Neighbors were asked the same questions repeatedly. Did you hear anything unusual? Did you see unfamiliar vehicles? Did anyone scream? Most answers were the same. No, nothing unusual. One neighbor believed they had heard a woman scream sometime during the early morning hours, but they dismissed it after hearing no further sounds. Another person recalled seeing an unfamiliar vehicle in the neighborhood, though details were vague. Investigators documented every statement, hoping that one overlooked observation might unlock the mystery. But no clear picture emerged. Experienced detectives know that the first 48 hours of a missing person case are often the most important. Witnesses remember details more clearly. Physical evidence remains intact. Surveillance opportunities, limited in 1992, still have a chance of producing answers. Every passing hour reduces those chances. By the time investigators realized the Springfield 3 had likely been abducted, precious time had already slipped away. The trail was growing colder. And somewhere beyond the quiet streets of Springfield, 3 women had vanished without leaving a single clear clue behind. The mystery had only just begun. By Sunday afternoon, what had started as a worrying absence had become something much more serious. 3 women had vanished from a quiet suburban home without leaving behind a single explanation. The Springfield Police Department officially launched a missing persons investigation, but from the very beginning, detectives sensed they weren't dealing with an ordinary case. Adults rarely disappeared voluntarily while leaving behind their purses, their vehicles, their money, and every personal belonging they would need. Something had interrupted the normal rhythm of that house. The only question was, what? News spread quickly throughout Springfield. Friends, neighbors, classmates, and complete strangers volunteered to help search for any sign of Susie Streeter, Stacy McCall, and Cheryl Levitt. Flyers bearing the women's photographs appeared on telephone poles, storefront windows, and community bulletin boards. Local radio stations interrupted their regular programming to describe the disappearances, urging anyone with information to contact authorities. Search teams combed parks, wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and nearby fields. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder across open land, hoping to spot a piece of clothing, a purse, or any clue that could point investigators in the right direction. Helicopters flew overhead, while officers searched rivers and lakes surrounding Springfield. Every hour that passed without an answer made the silence feel heavier. Despite the massive effort, the searches produced nothing. No footprints, no abandoned vehicle, no discarded belongings. It was as if the 3 women had vanished into thin air. Back at the Delmar Street home, detectives conducted a painstaking examination of every room. They photographed furniture, collected fingerprints, and dusted surfaces for evidence. Every object was inspected. The beds appeared to have been used. The television was still on. A fan continued to run inside the house. Cheryl's reading glasses rested on a table, something investigators found particularly strange. Friends and family said she rarely went anywhere without them. If she had willingly left the house, why would she leave behind something she depended on every day? The purses remained lined up neatly together, almost as though their owners had planned to return in just a few moments. Instead, they were never seen again. The scene suggested that whatever had happened occurred suddenly. The women may have believed they would be back shortly, or they may never have had the opportunity to gather their belongings. As investigators spoke with family members and friends, another unsettling detail emerged. In the hours after the women disappeared, several strange phone calls had been received at the house. Friends who had entered the home before police arrived answered the ringing telephone. According to later accounts, the caller made sexually explicit comments before hanging up. The calls seemed disturbing, but because no one realized they were standing inside a potential crime scene, the caller's identity was never recorded. Police attempted to trace the calls afterward, but by then it was too late. Whether the anonymous caller had any connection to the disappearances remains one of the case's enduring mysteries. Some investigators believe the calls were likely unrelated prank calls. Others wondered if the person on the other end of the line knew far more than they ever admitted. Detectives turned their attention to the people who had seen the women during the final hours before they vanished. Classmates described Susie and Stacy as happy throughout graduation night. Partygoers reported nothing unusual. Friends confirmed that the decision to spend the night at Susie's house had been made at the last minute because another friend's home was too crowded. That detail immediately caught investigators' attention. If someone had been planning an abduction, how would they have known the girls had changed their plans so late in the evening? Was the crime completely random? Or had someone followed them after the graduation celebrations? The possibility raised even more questions than answers. Stacy McCall's mother, Janice, refused to believe her daughter had simply run away. She knew Stacy too well. Her daughter had been excited about graduation, had plans for the future, and would never leave without telling someone. As the days passed, Janice became one of the strongest voices keeping the investigation alive. She spoke to reporters, pleaded for information, and encouraged the community not to forget the 3 missing women. Every interview carried the same message. Someone knew something. Someone had seen something. And sooner or later, that person needed to come forward. The investigation quickly exploded. Telephone lines at the police department were flooded with tips from across Missouri and neighboring states. Some callers claimed to have seen the women at truck stops. Others believed they had spotted them in shopping malls or restaurants. One report suggested the women had been forced into a van. Another claimed they had boarded a bus. Each lead sounded promising, until detectives investigated. Again and again, the sightings proved to be mistaken identities. Hope rose, then disappeared. It became a painful cycle that investigators and families would repeat for years. As evidence remained scarce, investigators began discussing a frightening theory. Perhaps the women had opened the door willingly. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken locks, no damaged windows. Could someone have knocked on the door late that night? Maybe it was someone Susie or Cheryl recognized. A friend, a neighbor, an acquaintance. If the women believed they were safe, they might have unlocked the door without hesitation. That theory could explain why there were no signs of a violent struggle inside the house. But it also meant the suspect might have been someone known to at least one of the victims. By the end of the first week, investigators faced a heartbreaking reality. The trail had gone cold. Physical evidence was almost non-existent. Witness memories had already begun to fade. The unknown caller had vanished. The women remained missing. Yet detectives refused to close the file. Boxes of reports filled with interviews, photographs, maps, and handwritten notes began to pile up inside the police department. Every lead, no matter how unlikely, was documented. Every rumor was investigated. Every possibility remained on the table. Because somewhere, hidden beneath thousands of pages of evidence, detectives believed the truth still existed. They just hadn't found it yet.